Thanks for clicking on the video today, everybody. I know this is one that a lot of people have been waiting for. So it took me a lot of time to actually get this technique down, and I've learned a lot about how you import complex animations into Lumion. I find that it doesn't really matter when you're importing just a block spinning or a block sliding. A lot of different ways work, but when you have this many moving parts, especially when they're all grouped together, you do actually have to do it in a very specific way. And what I found was kind of surprising about this is I actually don't use FBX. It was just constantly messing up, and all of the success that I've had from importing into Lumion seems like it is always with Collada. And I've actually been able to take that a step further with this one so that it's even more accurate inside of Lumion. Hope everyone enjoys this, and I hope you learned something. Something I also want to be clear about when we begin the video here is that I'm going to be using the transportation add-on for all of the car models in this. I'm obviously not going to be showing you how to model a car, and I'm also not going to be showing you how to rig a car in this particular video, just because that is quite a bit more complex, and I will be getting into that on how to do it with free cars in Blender, free cars from Turbo Squid, and even possibly how to take one from the 3D warehouse and rig that inside of Blender and bring that into Lumion. I would probably say you shouldn't do that. Like, I want to see if it's possible for me to do it, but I feel like there's too many free cars that are done not in SketchUp that it just really wouldn't make any sense to me to really want a SketchUp car in there. But as I mentioned, I kind of want to learn that just so that I have the knowledge, and I will spend the time if other people want to know it. Now, what I really want the focus of this video to be on is the steps that you have to do in Blender to get it into Lumion. The reason being is that by showing all of the different steps that I take, it may actually help you with softwares besides Blender. So if you use Cinema 4D or 3ds Max, there may be a step that I do that you try and replicate in that software that actually helps you get it in. Because the biggest problem I was having with FBX is I found that what would happen is the wheels would be linked to the body of the car, and then the body of the car, because it's moving, the origin point of the wheels would actually be moving in this very strange fashion. And so the wheels would be kind of going like up above the car and then back underneath. And so they were almost orbiting instead of rotating. And the way that I fix that is by just dropping an empty in Blender. It may be called something else in another program, but the empty is a non-moving object effectively that is going to be like the anchor for the entire car. The car is still going to move the same distance, the same speed and everything, but all the origin points are going to have a place at the beginning where they're kind of tied back to. So as the car is moving and rotating, it's actually got a whole other keyframe for moving as well. And that may sound complex, but it's actually easier for Lumion to understand it like that, because then instead of it having to recalculate where the tires are at all times, it's just going to say the tires, back at this point, and now it's translated this far away from the origin point. So it may be a little bit confusing to hear it explained like that, but once you see how I do it, it will make more sense, because once I sort of got this workflow down, it's worked every time. I haven't had any problems with it. Whereas even in my animated fan video that I did, you saw that I really struggled with constantly getting it in, because I kept slightly tweaking features that I didn't really understand how it worked, and then it just wouldn't work. So without further ado, we're going to get started. I just feel like I needed to kind of clear that part up before we get going on this. So I'm going to be using the 4x4 Audi with this one. I think that's how you say it. But we're going to drop the vehicle in, and it's just going to appear in the center here. Now, as you can see, it comes with all of these extra rigs on it. I'm going to show you why that's so important in a moment. So I'm going to take this car, and we actually have to make it editable for animation. That's one thing I should have mentioned. So you have to click this button, and now it is ready to go. So I'm going to take this, actually, I'm just going to turn on the screencast keys as well. So turn this on, set origin. Right. So if you are at all confused about what I'm doing, all of my key actions and mouse clicks will all be right here. As you can see, if I hit E, R, E, all that stuff, so it's right there. And right, so I'm going to grab the car, hit GY, because I want it to be up at the top of the hill to start. I'm going to just move it over this way a little bit, move it up. Now, this is the part that people may find weird, but I actually want the car to start up here. The reason being is that we have an add-on called Rigacar. Now, what Rigacar can do is it can actually detect the ground. So when you were watching that video at the beginning and the car was bumping up and down, I didn't do any of that. The add-on does, it just completely does it, because between Transportation and Rigacar, all the shock systems in the car are rigged, so when it starts moving, the car will move accordingly. But then it can also just tell exactly where the ground is. So then those shock systems will interact with the ground. What we're going to do is once you're at this point, you're going to go up to object mode, click on this, and there's actually a pose mode now. So unless you have an animated or a rigged skeleton with bones or whatever, pose mode, I believe, doesn't show up. I'm not a huge animator, so if I get some of this stuff wrong, I do apologize for that. I really only know how to use it on a baseline level and to get what I need done. So pose mode. Now, we can click on this. We're going to go to Rigacar, ground sensors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click ground. I'm just going to take the eyedropper. And as you can see, now, whatever it was, so the ground sensor axle, the front. So the front axle is trying its hardest to get down to the ground. So I'm just going to go through with these other objects here. I'm going to click on the ground sensor for all of them. And as you can see, the car is snapping to it now. But there is one more thing we're going to do. I like to change it to project. So all of the nearest surface, that gets changed to project. And, oh, I missed one here. So project, project. Okay, so what we can actually see now is if I still have this selected, so I'm still in pose mode, I hit GY. And as you can see, when I move the car left and right now, it's going to interact with the ground. So there is something that I notice about this as well. So if I hit GY again, I find that once you get to about here, oh no, it didn't do that too bad that time. Sometimes I find that it goes into the ground. If you find that it is doing that, yeah, this one's not too bad. If you do find it's going into the ground, what I like to do is just change this amount here to like, change the max local Z to like 0.2 meters. And it seems to work. As I mentioned, it doesn't always mess up like that, but perhaps it changes when I'm going to keyframe it in here. So we're going to drag this part up at the bottom a little bit, just so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to change it to 850 frames. I'm going to scroll out here. Now, I'm going to turn this on because this is just auto keying and I like how that works. So I'm going to hit GY just to move it a little bit so it's now keyframed. I'm going to slide this over to 850, GY, and then I'm going to move that right here. So this should be keyframed in now, and as you can see when we move it back, the car is now moving. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set the camera right here just so that we can see what happened. So if I hit the space bar, that's going to play it. And as we can see, the car is now actually moving and it seems to be interacting with the ground exactly how we want it to. What we need to do now is, it seems like we have most of the animation, but there's some cleaning up we have to do. So something I don't like about these cars, and we're going to go back into object mode here, is if we go into the car object in the outliner, a lot of these cars have all these extra models on the inside. So the brake disc, the chrome bolts, all that stuff is separated, but I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all of these. I'm just going to rotate myself over here. So once I have these selected, I'm going to hit join. And now this is one object. I'm going to click on the tire now. Or I'm going to click on the joined rim. I'm going to click on the brake pad here. I'm going to click on the tire, hit join again. So now the tire is just one object. But what I don't completely understand how this works, because I thought this would mess it up when I ran through it the first time. But if I hit spacebar, all of the animations are still working as intended, which I think is pretty cool. So again, I have no idea how that works, but it does work pretty well. And this is what I was actually talking about right here. So if you see the tires going in like this is where you can increase it slightly. And I will do that, but I'll just finish what I was doing with the tires here. So I'm going to grab all these, join them. So brake pad, rim, tire. Oop. Sometimes when you're clicking, you can click on the rig here, but you don't want that. So you want to click on the rim, brake pad, tire. I'm going to do it again. And wheel brake. Right, so is this one? No, that one's not done yet. So join them up. And it is a little bit tedious, but I'm trying to go a little bit slower than I normally do just because I don't want people to get too lost with it. As I said, there's a lot of weird little steps with this, but once you get it down, like I think I did the example scene that I wanted to in like 5 minutes maybe. So it's really not that bad. And I've only done this I've only done this 3 or 4 times. It took me probably 40 or 50 attempts just doing different steps to get this to work. So before I lose my progress, I'm going to call this car 3 animation, but you can name it whatever you want. And then I'm going to go into body, and I'm just going to keep connecting stuff. I find that it just helps the file with understanding the animations of everything, because instead of having 18 objects, the Collada file has to determine where it's moving. It's only going to have one. And then in reality, you could just, you know, a lot of this stuff that's getting connected here doesn't really make a difference. So we'll join that. And then I think if I join these two things, typically this one lags. Oh, no. Okay. Last time I did this, this lagged for a couple of minutes, but I guess it didn't do that there. So that's good. And okay, so we didn't want to do that because that actually unlinked it. So that was my bad there. So you always want to check, hit spacebar just to make sure that the animation's all still working. If something doesn't move with the animation, you went wrong in some part there because it's no longer linked to the car rig. So the body, this, I guess we could just leave this one then. Yeah, we're just going to leave that one in there. I think that should be fine. So we'll save that. I'll close these ones up. These ones should all be good to go. I'll hit spacebar one more time to check. And that one's good. So what we need to do now is we need to actually bake this animation into the car. And, oh, actually, no, before I do that, I just wanted to quickly show how you fix this tire going into the ground here. Because I know I had mentioned that. So this is what I do. I typically go 0.2. And see, now it's actually sitting on top of it. And I think that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to go through and change 0.2 for all of them. And it will just change how the car works a little bit on the road, but it just means that the car's not going to dip in so much, which if you were doing something like a dirt road, you may actually want it to dip in a little bit because you're going to want to see the car going in the mud or something. But for this, it's more of a stone path, I guess, like a rocky terrain. So we don't want the car tire to go in too much. If I hit that, I think that's looking a lot more crisp. And right now, I think we can bake the animation because ultimately we don't want this rig to be exported with the car. We want all of the objects to have their own animation. And I think what I can do is I'll hold shift and right click. And then I'm going to, I'm going to hit Control S just to save it quickly. I'm going to hit, oh, I need to go into object mode. So I then, you go into object mode, hit Shift A. We're going to make an empty here, plane axis. So I'm going to rename this up here, car empty. Then I'm going to move that down into this group. And this is what I was talking about at the beginning. This is going to be the anchor that we connect all of the objects to, so that when the Collada is exporting, it's just easier, I think, for Lumion to understand when there's an anchor at the end where that's not moving, but then the car is moving in relation to it. If the anchor or the object everything is linked to is the body of the car, that's actually a moving object. So I believe it has to do more calculations to go, okay, the car is here. It has to check where everything else is. Whereas if that anchor isn't moving, it doesn't have to do that extra calculations, the extra calculations rather. So could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty confident that that is how it works because it works without a problem. So we're going to grab the terrain and hide it. And I actually did get a little bit ahead of myself because there is one small step we have to do. I'm going to make an Excel checklist for you to go through if you ever want to do this. It is a lot of very specific steps. None of them are really difficult, but you do need to practice this a few times just to get them down pat. And as you can see, I actually just made a mistake. I may cut that part out, but yeah. So what you're going to do is just click on the tires, go object, select origin, or sorry, set origin, and then origin to geometry. We're going to go through to each tire and do that. That's just so that if you see right now, this tire's origin point is in the center of the car here, almost like an axis, but I actually want that to be right on top of the tire. So you can see that orange dot is now in the middle of the tire. It may be tough to see on YouTube, but there is just a little dot there. this one right here, we want to move that to the center of the car. So object, set origin, origin to geometry. Object, set origin, origin to geometry. So this one too, this one's not as important, but we'll just set it to geometry, I guess. And then if I click space, everything is working. And that is good to bake now. I believe the reason why I wanted to backstep is I'd already gone and baked it, but then I realized that if you change the origin point after you bake something, I believe that's going to mess everything up. So you do want to change the origins before you bake it, because once you bake it, it's no longer on the rig, and the rig is the thing that's kind of tying everything together. So even if you make a change, the rig will still function in the same way. But once you get rid of that, which I believe you need to, then yeah, that's when it can just get a bit weird. So you definitely want to set the origins first. So yeah, now that we did that, we can select everything. You're going to hit F3, bake action. You're going to turn all of these on. I think clear parent is the one that's important, but when I had the most success, I turned all of these on. So I don't completely understand what they do, but you get the point. Just check all these on, bake the data object. So we're going to be taking the pose data and we're baking it onto the object. So the tires, the body of the car, exactly where it is at every single frame is going to be keyframed onto that object so that Lumion can read it. Yeah, start frame, end frame. Okay, this is going to take a second, and we'll know we did it right if when we hit enter here, or sorry, spacebar here, the rig doesn't move. So as you can see, the car is rolling away from it because we've cleared the parent here and put all of its information into this model. So I'm just going to pull this back to 1. I'm going to right click up here and unlink this. That'll disappear. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab this, shift left click the empty, right click parent object. So now click that there. And as this is what I was talking about. So you can actually see the visual lines here. So this is the anchor. And this, I believe this just helps Lumion read how the Collada is working. And so as you can see, everything's looking good there. And I think it's ready to export now. So there is one last thing I want to check. Sometimes with the transportation, you'll get some areas of the car that have backface culling in Lumion, which you won't see it in Blender, but if you turn on face orientation, so this car is good because, well, actually this side of the car is not. So if something is red, that means it's the back face. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the tire, and it looks like the entire piece is flipped. So we're going to go in here, click on this object, hit tab, hit A, Alt N, because it pulls up the normals menu, flip. Now, as you can see, the whole tire is blue and it will not be see-through. So we're going to do the same thing with this. Tab to get in, hit A to select everything, Alt N, flip. And then now that should be good. Those flickering red faces are just because there's a back face behind the main face. You won't see that in Lumion. If a blue and red flickering face typically will work. It just means that you're seeing the inside of it just because of like some weird clipping. It's kind of like in SketchUp when two faces are too close to each other. Yeah. And okay, so I'm going to pull this back to number 1. And I'm just going to make sure that Lumion is open. Okay, so yeah, we'll bring this back to number 1. And we're going to export this as a Collada. And I'm going to call this, car 3 animation. Now, I don't think you have to select anything special here. I find that it works when I just use the default settings with Blender. And if you don't see Collada, I think what you may actually have to do is go to Edit, Preferences, go to Add-ons, and then if you type in... Okay, so I think Collada is just a native version. So it sometimes with FBX and things like that, you have to go turn it on, but I guess that's not the case with Blender. So everyone should have this. So I'm just going to save it one more time. Now I'm going to export Collada, desktop animation, or sorry, car 3 animation, export. And this does, I think this might take like, less than 30 seconds. I can't remember exactly how long it took, but I know it's a way faster than the FBX version. And let me see. I may have to unhide the plane. So maybe I will just export that one more time. So I'll hit Alt H just to make sure that is unhidden. I'm pretty sure it would still export, but I just wanted to make sure. So let's try that one more time. export, Collada, desktop, overwrite this one. Okay, so we have our model exported, and now for the fun part, we can test if I somehow messed it up along the way. I don't think that I did, but we will check that. So let's see if I just refresh this. There it is. Make sure you hit import animations in Lumion too, because many a times I was thinking that there was something wrong with my model that I exported when it turns out I just didn't have that button clicked. It is pretty easy to overlook, so don't forget to click that. Right, so when you get to this part, if you don't see anything, it's just because it is a fairly big file, and so Lumion by default won't let you place it. But everything looks to be working there. Let's give it a second. Going to drag this up. As you can see, everything is looking pretty good. I don't think there's any issues there. We'll just we'll zip back to the beginning here and go into material mode, and just so that we can examine the car. So maybe I'll put on a little. Oh, that's interesting. So it actually moves when you try and change the. So let's go back into material mode. Okay, so this way we can see it pretty well. So now this is a pretty easy part. We're just going to come in here, maybe change a little bit of the glass. Let's make it tinted glass. Why not? Just so you can't see inside. We're going to make this metallic. So what I like to do is drag this up. Not so you don't want it all the way metallic, but you want it kind of halfway. So something like that. So you can turn the gloss down to 0.8 as well. I find this works fairly well. This is a really shiny car paint, but if you bring it down a little bit, you're going to get a different result. If you pull it all the way to 2, it's metal. I think that 1.9 and 2 in Lumion is just metal. So I don't like to have it all the way up because while it is a metallic, it's not quite like a full metal. And, maybe just change the tires up a little bit, make them look a little more attractive. This can be just some black glass. The plastic, same thing. We're just going to make that some, fairly reflective, but not too bad. And we're going to make this chrome. So we'll just use the Lumion chrome for this part. And I could change this around. There is actually a texture I think that I can get in my library with that, but I just, couldn't really be bothered. Did I not change this one yet? Oh, I didn't. Okay, so we're going to make this chrome as well. And right there. And then this, I want that to be black. What's sort of cool about these as well is that while it's not an amazing interior, there is actually an interior. And so it's it could be kind of annoying to put the camera in, but you could have like a handheld camera that's animated, so you're actually bumping up and down with the car. That might be kind of neat to do, but I'm probably not going to bother with that because that sounds pretty annoying. Plastic shiny gray. So let's make this something like this. Maybe something like that. Okay, so it's not perfect, but I think that this is definitely good enough. We'll make this just this kind of red here. Let's just make this plate white. And you don't want to put, you could put flicker on it, but because we might get so far away from the camera, I think that'll mess it up because flicker does seem to change based on your distance with the camera. So I think that's looking a lot better already. So if we just go into, not movie mode. So I'm going to get out of this mode. Let's just see how this looks. Let's take a second. So let's just loop back to the beginning. So I do want to just take a look at the car while it's moving from the beginning. I want to see just how the materials look and everything, but I think this one is good. And let's just take a moment. And yeah, I think it's looking good. Especially it'll look great in the animation. I think I could make the headlights emissive as well, but I probably won't bother just for this. And also those weird shadows will go away once I actually render it. It's just because it's doing a preview. So let's just set up a little animation and then we are good to go. So I'm going to do record. And this isn't going to be anything crazy. I'm just going to have it at the beginning. So maybe just something like right here. Maybe move it back a little bit so it goes something like... If this doesn't show up at the beginning, that's fine. We're going to be using time warp. So something like this. Now this is a really cool animation for imported objects. So what you can actually do is go to time warp offset for animated imported models. As you can see, you can actually control where that car is at. So you want it to start right here. Cool. So that's the first shot. The next shot, we're just going to have it maybe like down here. And just make this kind of a generic length. We're going to put the time warp in for this one as well. We're going to start it right here. So if you hit play here, I want it to be following the car a little bit, so I'm going to bring it, stop right here, edit the clip. Something like this. Let's see how well this will track the car. So yeah, good enough. It's not, you know, I don't want to get too far into doing the animations. I'm just going to have one last one here. And this is why I love time warp so much, because it kind of lets you just play around with the position of the car, and it does work pretty well with the camera. So I think this last one, I'm just going to put it right here, like this, 6, and then let's just see with time warp where we want the car to be at the beginning of the clip. So maybe right here. So something I probably should have done is left a bit of the animation so it stays right here, but I think this is pretty good because the car won't zoom back. If we just hit play. There it is. All right, so that's basically it. I really, really like what this trick means for Lumion, because I always had trouble with animations, but if this anchor trick actually works as well as I think it does, this opens the doors for a lot more than just a single car animation. It opens it for drifting cars. You could actually link a car to another car inside of Blender for the animation purposes. So you could have an actual car chase where you only have to animate one car going through a city, and then you could have 2 or 3 cars behind it actually chasing after it. Because if you look inside of the transportation pack, there is actually a police vehicle. You know, there's some public transport, and there's also a sport car rally. That's one that I find kind of interesting. So you could do some pretty cool stuff with that. As I mentioned, I do really want to make another video that focuses on how to get free cars and rig them, because Blender Kit is it's an add-on that comes free with Blender. And if you just type in car into this, there are some pretty nice cars. So example, this McLaren, you can just click it. It's in your scene. You do have to do a little bit of workshopping. As you can see, it comes in at sort of like a weird angle, but I will just show you this quickly. So this is the kind of stuff that I want to learn how to do to show everyone, because there may be a way that I can, you know, animate this car. And so even if you don't have transportation, you'd still be able to bring in a model that you have and animate it. I'm really hoping that this trick that I learned here can lead to some better ways of doing vertex animation inside of Lumion, because currently bringing in FBX files from 3ds Max is, 1, pretty annoying, and 2, it really bogs down Lumion. But it seems like, I haven't really run too many tests on this, but it does seem like Lumion handles these Colladas pretty well. You know, this is an 850 frame animation. It's half a gigabyte, and it doesn't seem to really slow down the viewport at all. I'm still at 42 frames, which is, with 1 star, that seems like it's typically what it runs at. So yeah, I think it's really, really cool. If you found this video interesting, I'd really appreciate it if you could like the video and also subscribe to my channel if you're not already. If you are going to subscribe, I'd really appreciate it if you could ring the bell so you can join us for more future videos, especially the ones that I'm going to focus on in the future about cars. And if you are subscribed, thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you in those videos. Have a great night, everybody, and stay healthy.